Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
What is up? Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast. It is a Monday, and I am Tom Dougherty, which means this is a college football edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, which, of course, is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today on a Monday, we have some news out of Miami on their quarterback. There was some talk that Malik Rosier was going to fall. He fell off last year, so wasn't the answer for Mark Richt there. But there's pressure. Obviously, it's a big program. They haven't quite had the pedigree that they've had in the past. Obviously, in the 90s and 80s when they were perennial powers. But Mark Richt obviously trying to get him right back there after seeing his former school that he was coaching at, Kirby Smart, in his first year go to the college football playoff in Georgia. Mark Richt might want to just say, hey, I can do that too. But with this Miami team, we were hot for a while, then we just kind of hit the skids at the end. But we'll do a little talk on Malik Rosier probably in this first segment and the Miami football program as a whole. Also, in the second segment, we're going to do a little talk on Georgia and Jake Fromm coming back in his second year. I know there was a story out. He was having a little fun fishing, got a little caught up in his own fishing hook, fishing lure. We'll probably talk about that a little bit, but also talk about the fact that he's coming back as a sophomore now with a full season under his belt as a freshman and already going to the college football playoff to see what that's going to mean going into this season and into the rest of his career. And then in the third segment, we're also going to talk about some transfers, some big transfers coming from big schools to other big schools, and Joe Burrow finally made a decision on where he wants to go and transfer to. So we'll talk about that in the third segment. But now we're going to go back and, like I said, Miami football, first segment here. Malik Rosier obviously is that quarterback they are going to be having there. Obviously, he's going to be the guy who they're going to put a lot of pressure on. It's going to have a lot of pressure on him. And when it comes to pressure, that's when that's Malik Rosier's comfort zone. He's all right when he feels pressure. Teammates and we've had people come out from around the program come out and said that he performs best under pressure. Obviously, last year, I don't know quite how. He definitely had some pressure last year. They were undefeated going into their 10th game or 11th game, and it starts falling flat. They lost to I think they lose to Pitt, right? They lost to another, obviously an ACC team. They lost to somebody who wasn't quite in their echelon of football talent they were at last year. But, coming into this season, we'll probably look at their schedule as well. But the fact that they're doing so well last year and then to fall off like that is a bit of a red flag, I think, because they were destined for. I think they were probably pretty much destined to go to that college football playoff, but it wasn't quite in the cards as but definitely a team that would have been cool, good for college football. Obviously, there's lots of programs out there that where you could say when they're good for college football. They make college football more exciting. They beat up on Notre Dame. They definitely have had games where they just put the hurting on people. They did lose to Clemson in the national. Yeah, they lost to Pitt. So that's what happened. Yeah, so they lost to Pitt in the in their final in their final game against the ACC, coming off a win of over Virginia and then over Notre Dame, who was actually ranked 11th in the nation at that point when they played. But they lost to Pitt, and then they in a game where they couldn't really get anything going on offense, and then obviously they get crushed by Clemson in the ACC championship game before losing to Wisconsin in the Orange Bowl. So, like I said, those 3 losses in a row, obviously all in pressure-filled big games. So, Malik, I don't know what your coaches and teammates and your buddies all say you performed great under pressure, but you had 3 opportunities right there. Obviously, after the first one, after you lose to Pitt, and then or even lose after losing to Clemson, because obviously Clemson being the number 1 team in the nation, it's going to be a tough test going in there and playing them in the ACC championship game, but only able to muster 3 points. I mean, is that how good the Clemson defense is? Is it really that hard to get up against them? I mean, looking at the box score from that game, Malik Rosier was only 14 for 29 for 110 yards, 2 picks in that game. I mean, that's nothing to write home about right there. He definitely had the pressure on him. I mean, talk about if they had won that game against Pitt, they come in undefeated against Clemson, I think, who was also undefeated, or in this one. Yeah, they were also undefeated in that game as they came in. I think either that they couldn't be 12-2 because that would make any sense. But yeah, no, they came into that game and put the hurting down on Miami after obviously then going to the College Football Playoff and losing. But I mean, Clemson, you can't mess around with them. You got to come up, and I mean, they're going to put as much pressure on you as possible. And I think coming into this season, I mean, we're going to turn, obviously, looking into this season for Miami and seeing what they got on their schedule. I mean, it's probably not going to be anything easy. I mean, they're going to open up against LSU. We'll get to them in a little bit, probably at the end of the show as well. LSU is, I mean, to start off the season on September 2nd. I mean, it's going to be a big game right there to start off the season. Whether it's going to be, it's going to be at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, or in Arlington, and I think that's one of the games. I guess one of those Saturday night football games. So whether that's going to be on that Saturday or on I think that's going to be one of the Sunday. That's the Sunday game. I think I talked about that last week when we were talking about the announcement of those games. Those Saturday night football games. ESPN trying to double down. Obviously, they have already an NFL version, but now they're trying to go college football version as September 2nd is indeed a Sunday, and they'll be playing. I think the first game is the Alabama game against. I talked about that last week. Who are they playing? I'll think about it. It'll come to me. But Miami will be going against LSU in that game in Dallas. So. I mean, that whole opening weekend is going to be pretty crazy. But then they come back, they play 3 pretty cupcake teams. That's pretty much 3 wins, regardless of what happens against LSU. But Savannah State at home, they go to play Toledo on the road, and then they play FIU for Florida International at home. So before starting the ACC schedule, where they're going to have a bunch of home games, it looks like, to start. Or a couple they're going to play UNC and Florida State at home before going to Virginia, and then Boston College, play Duke at home. Virginia Tech, that's going to be a tough one on the road against Virginia Tech. But then again, they play Pitt at home. I mean, that game last year against Pitt was the trap. I mean, that was kind of a trap game. It was an early morning game in Pittsburgh on the road. I mean, I think that's a game that a lot of experts kind of picked to be a trap game for Miami, for them to stumble against an unranked Pitt team. But I mean, definitely coming into this season, it looks like that they're going to have to try and right the ship a little bit there. Obviously, Mark Richt knows how to get over a tough season. Is how to do it a couple of times at Georgia, coming over after winning a bunch of games early in the year and then coming in and losing your last few. But as far as around the supporting cast around Rosier, obviously, a guy who apparently does not get flustered. I mean, you do want. That's the thing about guys who work well under pressure quickly. They nothing bothers them. They don't get flustered under pressure. Well, part of getting flustered is part of caring, or it's part of the effort value. I'm not saying that he doesn't care or doesn't give any effort when it's like a tough time, but being almost too cool is not taking. It's almost kind of a characteristic of not taking things seriously enough when it comes to big situations. And I don't think maybe that Pitt game, he didn't take it seriously enough. And yeah, it was cool under pressure. And then, you lose that game. Now you get into a must-win game. They had to win that game. If they beat Clemson in that ACC championship game, then they probably obviously have a better chance of getting in, but they probably do get in after beating Clemson, the number 1 team in the nation. So they did not. Obviously got stomped by Clemson by 35. And they didn't make it in. So, I mean, that's pressure. If there's any pressure, you have to win. You're going to go into this game in a neutral field against a tough team, and you lay an absolute egg. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to hopefully get into pressure. This whole pressure thing is a situation for Rosier, obviously. He's definitely the guy that they trust the most there in Coral Gables, and for sure when it comes to the other quarterbacks, they had a chance for Nkosi Perry, Cade Weldon, Jerem Williams are all a bit on the younger side, and Rosier definitely being the older statesman there becomes the most trustworthy guy to get the ball for. As well, there's another guy when it comes to quarterbacks at Miami. There was Evan Sheriffs, who was supposed to be the guy last year before Rosier came in on that transfer. So, I mean, whether he was a guy, Rosier's just been the guy who's always fought for his job and been able to be there. So that's where they kind of pull on this calm, cool, under pressure thing, where he was able to fight for a job, whatever have you. So, I mean, this season, playing in the ACC, you don't have a game against Clemson. You play your toughest road game probably is going to be that Virginia Tech game on the road. But everything else they play is pretty satisfactory, pretty easy. I'm not going to say easy. Nothing's easy. You got to play the games. You can't just go into a town chocolate win. Florida State's going to be reloaded this year. Obviously, if they can get healthy and DeAndre Francois can figure out his legal situation, but that game's at home. The game's in Miami, so nothing really to worry about there. Their other road games, I mean, they have Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Virginia. So, and then obviously the Virginia Tech game at the end of the season will be a fun one. And then again, they end the season with Pittsburgh once again. But that game will be in Miami this time. So we'll see if they're going to be positioned this year. I mean, the schedule kind of stacks up. If they get through LSU to start off that season, start off 1-0. They can rack off some wins for sure, and definitely get to that Pittsburgh game at the end of the season with an undefeated record. Because I mean, obviously that Virginia Tech game on the road right before it on November 17th will be a tough test. But if they get through that one, they should be fine. I mean, they don't play. There's no Notre Dame on the schedule this year. There's no Clemson, and I mean, it looks like like I said, they do play Florida State, and they play LSU to start the season. Both those games are at home, though. Well, one's neutral field. Now, obviously, playing in Dallas is not playing on the road, but playing in Dallas is not playing on the home either. It is kind of it's definitely farther to go for those Miami players than it is for the LSU players. But playing in those kickoff games, it's going to be on a Sunday. You'll have a kind of NFL feel. You're playing at an NFL stadium. They're going to be chomping to go. It's the first game of the year. You don't mess around with that. I think these guys obviously getting through all of training camps and spring. Obviously, you're done with spring football, getting through training camps, summer workouts, all that kind of stuff. You're going to be chomping at the bit to get at those LSU Tigers come. What's that? September 2nd, Sunday there in Arlington. After that's going to be that whole Saturday night football. Obviously, Alabama will be getting that game. Obviously, I want to say they're playing Texas, but they're not, because Texas is that big series that's going to be happening in a few years. But obviously, they've set up that home schedule for 2022, 2023. They play Louisville. Alabama plays Louisville. That's why I was never going to come up with that. They play Louisville on September 1st. Just wanted to get that right. But yeah, no. I don't know. Miami, the way their schedule sets up, they have basically 2 tough games, maybe 3. everything else should be pretty much a win. Mark Richt can get that win, whether it's home or road, and they can get back where they were, and probably end up playing Clemson again for the ACC title game, because obviously being in the two separate divisions helps them out, and they're definitely the best two teams in their respective division. All right, that'll wrap it up for this first segment. We're going to come back with some talk on the SEC, Georgia, Jake Fromm, whatever it may be. We'll do that when we come back, so stay tuned.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, GSMC Football Podcast, as we are now going to talk about some stuff coming out of Georgia regarding Jake Fromm. Let's talk about just some discussion on Jake Fromm as a whole, as a quarterback as a whole. Obviously, a guy who's been highly touted out of high school, was record breaker, played. I think he didn't play in the Little League World Series as a baseball player as a 12-year-old. Well, he played in the college football playoff as a freshman in college, obviously, right after coming out of high school. Still a very young kid, still raw talent there, but showed some serious poise beyond his years. Was able to outduel the Heisman Trophy winner, the future number one pick in the NFL, Baker Mayfield, and the game prior, and then was on the brink of winning a national championship with Georgia. The next game, obviously, Tua Tagovailoa, another freshman, had something to say about that one. But as far as Jake Fromm goes, obviously, the story came out today regarding him having some issues with a fishing line down in as he obviously is an avid fisherman and is a guy who has been seen a lot on his social media posting with a big whatever kind of fish he's getting at that time. Obviously, it's a big thing for him and his family, which is cool. I mean, nothing wrong with fish, but looking at his social media, you can see that it's kind of a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, he got caught some stuff, but then obviously caught a fishing hook in the back of his leg, as well as he had to go to a hospital to have that removed. Shouldn't be an issue though, as he is a guy who's probably either not used to that or has seen it happen, or it's not going to be big of a deal. It's just a flesh wound, I would assume seeing him saying. But on the football side of it, obviously he's had a good start to his career there at Georgia. Looking at their schedule coming up for this season, obviously in the SEC. On that other side of the SEC East versus the SEC West, but definitely has more weapons. Still has Calvin Ridley. Lost his two running backs though. Unfortunately, that's going to be a big thing to watch and see. Those two guys took a lot of pressure off of him. Made it easy out of the play action game with both those guys, whether it was Chubb or Sonny Michel back there. He was really able to get those linebackers basically taken out of the game, because those guys were so worried about Michel or Chubb that they weren't even worried about the passing game. And at this time, they're going to have to get. I think they have another guy in DeAndre Swift is another guy who is going to be, obviously, when it comes to Georgia and recruiting and stuff like that, you're going to have some serious, really good running backs, and And I think Jake Fromm will be just fine when it comes to his help in the backfield. As he's got DeAndre Swift from Georgia, the 5'9", 216-pound running back. For him, as he is returning obviously a highly touted recruit as well, but also played a little bit of a part last year in that run in the playoffs. So it's something to be excited. Can't knock that one, as you are going to be looking at how Jake Fromm is going to be bouncing back after that. I wouldn't call it heartbreaking. I call it just impressive, but probably disappointing, the fact that they got that far and were so close to winning. Last play of the game, literally one more defensive play, they had the game wrapped up, and it didn't matter because Tua Tagovailoa made a great play. I mean, there's absolutely nothing Jake Fromm can do about that, because he did everything he was supposed to do, got his team to lead. They went to overtime, got his team in lead in overtime. The defense, honestly, was the one that didn't really do him any favors in that one. In that game. But coming into the season, obviously, they have their big game is sandwiched in between. They have a big game early in the season on September 8th against South Carolina at South Carolina. That'll be and then sandwiched in between the two kind of cupcake games. They have a home game against Austin Peay. Then they go to South Carolina, go to Columbia, play the Gamecocks, and then they come back home to play Middle Tennessee. So kind of an interesting little stretch there. Obviously, you got then tough, and then again. So we'll see how Jake does with that one, kind of back and forth action. And then they go on the road to Missouri. That should be pretty easy. I mean, not easy, but it should be a win on the road. Good road victory for Georgia to put under their belt. They come back home for games against Tennessee and Vanderbilt, as those should both be wins before they go on the road and play LSU. LSU, even though they've had a couple down years, you never can write them off. Obviously, we know they have that big game at the beginning of the year against Miami. They're going to host Georgia this year. I think that defense on Georgia should be able to really take a lot of pressure off of Jake Fromm, and he won't have to score that many points, I don't think, in that game to get the win there. LSU's offense has never really been one to write home about, and that defense of Georgia is so good, and is definitely going to be a strong part of that team as it was last year. Obviously, losing a guy, the linebacker from that ended up going to the Bears. Obviously, losing him isn't helpful. That's Smith. So, going over to Roquan Smith, going over to the Bears isn't really that helpful. But there's always going to be another kid. There's always going to be another 4-star, 5-star recruit they're going to get in there and get that defense beefed up again, because that's how they're going to beat a lot of these teams. That's how they're going to beat LSU, and let Jake Fromm kind of just manage the offense. So that's the thing. He knows the difference. Even as a young quarterback, you saw it last year with Jake Fromm, is the fact that he can manage an offense. He could run, whether it's we need go time, we need points, we need a run and gun, or using the running game to his advantage, kind of, playing off of it. Obviously, you're getting some good coaching there at Georgia, but Kirby Smart's a defensive guy, and when you have a defensive coach, it's between you and your offensive coordinator to kind of get that stuff together. So they have that road game against LSU. They come back at home, play Florida at home. That'll be a funny game to watch. Obviously, Florida and Georgia, always a big rivalry there in the SEC, as that'll be a fun game. They'll have definitely Athens will be rocking that weekend. Imagine being down there. That'd be pretty fun. And then they'll be traveling to Kentucky on November 3rd. So that'll be a road game for them, as they're at Kentucky for that one. And then I'm back home for Auburn, home for UMass, and then home for Georgia Tech. So they finish off the season with 3 home games. That's always helpful going, I'm assuming they're going to be back up in the conversation for the college football playoff. Definitely in the conversation, if not already. By the time they get through those games, basically get through Auburn and UMass, they're going to probably be in clinching the SEC championship game berth. The rights to the SEC championship game will probably be there already, as the Bulldogs will be going there. But as far as Jake Fromm, obviously coming into that sophomore season, hopefully no sophomore slump coming. It's usually something you see more in the professional leagues, where you have a guy who is a big rookie, comes in, sets the world on fire as a rookie, has a decent rookie season, then comes in and really has a step back when it comes to his sophomore year. That could either become because of adjustments that people make. Obviously, in the professional leagues, there is a lot more adjustments made, a lot more advanced scouting and everything. But I mean, college football these days, in SEC, it's so close. I mean, not quite to talent level or just speed of the game, but when it comes to preparation and the amount of staff you have to help you get on the page that you need to be on in order to beat somebody, or when you have one guy, like, so every team knows that Jake Fromm is going to be that quarterback for Georgia, and he might not be able to surprise him. He might not be able to shock him. And I think last year Georgia was definitely the shocker team because, I mean, they were written off by a lot of people. I mean, Jake Fromm being a freshman quarterback coming in, people were like, oh, I don't trust that Georgia team. They have a freshman quarterback. Jake Fromm's going to be running for his life. Ivan said the same thing after they won all those games. They beat even after they beat Auburn in the SEC championship game. They come in. Obviously, that game against Oklahoma was a good one, but they gave up a bunch of points. Obviously, scored a bunch of points too to win that game. But I had that Jake Fromm had none chance against Alabama. The way Alabama played against Clemson, I thought he had none chance against Alabama. Maybe whether it's their offensive line is a little better and he had more time than Kelly Bryant did to run that offense or whatever it was. But he definitely showed a lot of poise against Alabama as they were so close to winning that game, weren't they? I mean, that game, I've watched that game over and over again, and I mean, where did they go wrong? Obviously, Nick having to make the decision to change over to Tua Tagovailoa from Jalen Hurts, because obviously that Roquan Smith and that Georgia defense was not making it easy at all for Jalen Hurts. Obviously, whether it's his lack of being able to take advantage of certain windows in the passing game, or I don't know. But obviously, Tua came in there and did just fine, got the team back in the game. Whether it's Georgia defense kind of just slowed down a little bit or whatever may have you. I think Jake Fromm, obviously, that's good, the fact that he had nothing to do with it. Not like he blew the game, not that he threw a big pick or anything. It was more the Georgia defense kind of just crumbled, and Alabama was able to come back. Obviously, the one thing you can't put on Jake is maybe the fact that he was never really able to add on in that game because, I mean, they had chances, obviously, to try and extend that lead and to keep it out of the reach of Alabama, but I mean, they were able to come back up and get that win. The fact that Jake was not on the field, or it wasn't a big pick or anything, it was an overtime game where they even went into overtime after all that stuff happened. They went into overtime and still weren't able to pull it out. Jake was able to get his team in a position to do it, though. So, I mean, you got to give credit to the young quarterback. I think he's definitely poised beyond his years, and having 2 or 3 more years, depending on how long he wants to stay in college, to refine his tools. I think he's going to be a guy you have to talk about being drafted high in the NFL. So, I got to like Jake Fromm. Got to keep an eye on him throughout this whole training camp and early and into the season. Obviously, he's going to get that test when it comes that first game against South Carolina on the road. Looking at more into this fishing lure he got stuck into his leg. I'm still looking to see if a picture, maybe link it and put it in the show notes. But I mean, obviously, I think it's kind of an occupational hazard. Obviously, when it comes to fishing and whatever it may be. But I mean, it looks like that definitely a guy who has done it is. I don't know if they don't have a picture of the fishing line sticking out of his leg. Kind of like gory details there, but obviously it's all over the wires when it comes to what to talk about Jake Fromm. Oh my gosh, the guy got a fishing wire stuck in his leg. He's done. It cut his art. No, I think he's fine. I think he can still run, and that's actually a big thing. He needs to be able to run. That's a big part of his ability. He's got some elusiveness. Got some. I think I see a little bit of a Sam Darnold in there. Maybe not. It needs to refine the tools a little bit. Not the biggest arm, not the most accurate, but definitely a guy who can get around and extend plays and make plays on his own, not just relying on that one read. And you can't, if you're a quarterback, you can't beat Alabama doing that. You cannot outbeat Alabama, or you can't even compete with Alabama doing the one read stuff. The stuff you see at Baylor, where it's like boom, get rid of the ball, boom, get rid of the ball. You had to be able to adjust and to make plays on the fly, and that's what he was able to do in that championship game. That's why he was going to be able to do this season, and could be even a guy you talk about thinking about Heisman, because he's definitely got the ability and be able to show off what he did last year as a freshman. Can only get better. Come on, he only can get better, right? As a sophomore and a junior, so. We'll talk about him probably a lot more coming through the season, but we'll take a break really quick here as we come to this segment. We're going to come back and talk about some more transfer stuff as we had some news coming out across the country from some big names picking in schools they wanted to transfer over to, and whether they're be sitting out or not. I know Joe Burrow is definitely one of those names, a guy from Ohio State, no longer on Ohio State, as I'll be talking about him and his new team when we come back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA Podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back to GSMC Football Podcast. As we have talked about Georgia and Jake Fromm, we talked a little bit about Miami and Malik Rosier, some of the big returning quarterbacks coming into this season. And then we have a couple different guys who are going to be looking to have some big seasons coming back for whether it's their sophomore, junior, senior year. I know Tua Tagovailoa is coming back, and we'll see. I know we made the comments. We talked about him last week. The fact that he said he would transfer if he didn't play in that game against Georgia. That's pretty tough. I mean, not being the starter and hopefully expecting that you're going to actually get in there as a backup. That's pretty. That's a lot to say. And we'll see if he actually becomes the permanent starter coming into this season. Also, we have Jake Browning up at Washington, looking to have another big year after that big sophomore year where he was in the the Heisman talk. That had a little regression last year due to a bum shoulder most of the season. But I think that it's going to be a big deal when it comes to obviously a big deal. It's college football. It's a big deal all over the place. But it's going to be a big deal for a lot of these quarterbacks coming into this season, especially the guys returning both Jake Fromm and Browning, and then you obviously got like Malik Rosier, Will Greer at West Virginia. It's going to be a big deal for him to have a big splash. Obviously, also at Stanford, you got KJ Costello trying to come back and play in his first full season. Also, Ohio State and Oklahoma looking for their next big quarterback, as they've had two guys move on. We'll see if Kelly Bryant becomes the starter again at Clemson. Obviously, Dabo Swinney has yet to make a decision on that one. A lot of position battles going on all over the different schools. Obviously, as we have now, even more stuff to talk about regarding some new guys coming into their schools. That's another transfer. That's Joe Burrow, and he's deciding he's going to be going over to LSU, actually. So Joe Burrow will be transferring to LSU, a guy who we haven't really seen play in that much volume. Obviously, JT Barrett took the bulk of the snaps there at Ohio State, but Joe Burrow was a guy who was a highly touted free recruit, and he was a guy who really wanted to play, obviously, as he's now going to be going on to LSU, and maybe a guy who can change that LSU quarterback. Obviously, there's going to be more competition there. When he came out on Twitter saying, Joe Burrow saying that he looks to have a good, excited playing in Death Valley next season. We'll see if he actually does get played. Obviously, there was a big wide open competition during spring. Miles Brennan, a sophomore. There's a redshirt freshman, Lowell Narcisi, and then junior Justin McMillan. So those are all the guys that were competing during the spring, obviously before Burrow comes in. But you bring in Burrow. Obviously, Burrow doesn't really have much playing experience. Only has 39 career passing attempts, which is the most among the entire quartet there at LSU. But this is a team that hasn't really been able to get a top tier quarterback. I mean, maybe whether Joe Burrow is going to be the guy to get that done for them, we don't know. But I mean, coming from a school like Ohio State, which recruits quarterbacks to be big parts of their offense, obviously JT Barrett wasn't quite the biggest name coming into the draft. He wasn't even drafted, and he was signed as an undrafted free agent by the New Orleans Saints. JT Barrett was, but Joe Burrow, I mean, he's a guy coming out of high school, and the type of recruit that he was. Obviously, he's going to be a guy that a lot of people are now coming in and asking, can he save LSU football? Can he be the guy what LSU needs? Obviously, they haven't really had, not that Jamarcus Russell he was a great college quarterback. That's the thing. They haven't really had a big quarterback since Jamarcus Russell, or maybe even, who was that quarterback they had? He went to the NFL, but didn't really do much in the NFL. I'll think about it in a little bit. I know they had another guy since Jamarcus Russell. Obviously, Jamarcus Russell was the number one pick overall, bombed in the NFL, but they've had another guy, Mettenberg. That's right. They had Mettenberg there as well, who is actually now, I think, a serviceable backup in the NFL as we right now. So I could even find out which team he's on right now. But yeah, so whether Joe Burrow is going to be that guy and try and Zach Mettenberger, and he's actually a free agent, but did play with the Titans as a backup. So he's been in the backup for the NFL. Also was a backup for the Steelers a couple years ago. So yeah, that was Mettenberger. Haven't really had anybody of note. So since then, Joe Burrow can be the guy. As far as measurables on Burrow, still remains to be seen what he can do as far as arm strength. Hasn't really had that much. Hasn't had that much experience behind the line of scrimmage or pretty much doing anything. It has some highlights out of Ohio State, but there's nothing really to go. Obviously, when it comes to transfers, going into a different conference can be kind of just a good change of scenery for people. Obviously, getting over there, he's a graduate transfer. Obviously, he'll finish his career in the SEC, but being a graduate transfer, you can just kind of pick it up right where you left off, and he'll be over at LSU after. It was pretty much between LSU and being a Bearcat at Cincinnati, so that was his two choices. He tried to go over to the big SEC power, or used to be big SEC power, not quite anymore. They're trying to rehash themselves. Obviously, this is a guy who was out of a high school in Ohio, went to the Plains in high school in Ohio, so. Was a guy who was, he was a 4-star recruit. He was when it comes to dual quarterbacks or overall, they list him as a pro-style quarterback. This is on 24/7 Sports. But, with Ohio State, he played 2 seasons, only got into 7 games combined, threw for 287 yards combined in both seasons for 2 touchdowns. And, had 37 pass attempts, 29 completions. So, when you're talking about volume, he's better than those other guys when it comes to volume at LSU. But, I think that the fact that Ohio State was going a different direction when it came to quarterback, there were some other guys who were in the way. I know that who was we've gone over all the quarterback controversy with other schools when it comes to whether it's going to be Tate Martell or Reed Borcell coming in there. I know there has Dwayne Haskins is another guy that is going to be I think Dwayne Haskins is going to be that job right now. Obviously, Joe Burrow definitely thought that he could have been a guy who was going to have a chance to get in there. I think that he was feeling like he should have been the starter, but obviously he's now ready to get to work, as he's quoted, ready to get to work. He even said that on his Twitter account as he announced the fact that he was going to be going over to LSU. Well, that's some big news, obviously, so that's another one. As we have, there's a couple different transfers. I know that they kind of trickle out the whole rest of the season. I know we have another big offensive lineman from Alabama who's transferring to Oregon. I know we talked about it last week, a guy transferring over to UCSF. The quarterback the guy who used to be at Arizona State before that big Arizona State quarterback kind of took everybody over by storm. But now he's going over to USF, University of Central Florida down there, or University of South Florida down there in Tampa. So lots of shit moving and shaking in the college football world. I know, talking about LSU, I want to go see. I mean, if Joe Burrow does win that job, I think he is a front runner for that job down there at LSU. I mean, obviously a new guy coming in, always tough to decide how everything's going to work. Obviously, there's three guys who went through all of spring football. I mean, that's kind of be tough on a coach. Obviously, for a coach to have these three guys in spring football, then you get it's kind of like a ringer. I mean, these guys have bonded all throughout the spring football season and schedule, whatever they have them do, and now you're having a guy come in and like, hey guys, I'm the new stud, I'm the new dude, like rally around me. It might not happen as quickly as they want to. Obviously, these guys in college football all seem to have. I mean, there's definitely team camaraderie. There's obviously some serious there's some inclusiveness involved. But for some of the bigger players, the skill players who might think that they have better chances to go to the NFL. I think honestly, if you're a receiver or a tight end or a guy who's going to be helped out by the talent at quarterback, the more talent at quarterback you get, the better, because they're going to make you look good. They're going to make your film look good when it comes to the scouts for the NFL. So if there's a big diva receiver, if there's a tight end who thinks that, that should have been the other guy's job, he's been here longer, look at who's going to get you the ball better and more often and more efficiently. I think that's going to be better for you in the long run. As far as their schedule this year for LSU, so we talked about Miami, the fact that they open up with Miami in Arlington on the 2nd of September. They have a game Southeast Louisiana, then they play at Auburn to start the SEC schedule. So that's gonna be an interesting game for them, a big test at the outset of the season. We'll see if Burrow is going to be the guy there to start off that season. They do have a game against Louisiana Tech the next week before they really get into the SEC. They're at home against Mississippi. They travel to Florida, so another big Florida game. Florida and Georgia are playing, LSU and Florida. Then they play at Georgia. They play at home against Georgia, at home against Mississippi State, and at home against Alabama. So it's going to be an interesting stretch, a tough stretch, but they're all going to be at home, 3 games in a row, all at Death Valley. So it's going to be, Georgia, Mississippi State, and Alabama, that final game being against Alabama. So they're going to have that long homestand and cap it off with that game against Crimson Tide. It'll be a fun one to watch that's on November 3rd. So be sure to tune into that one. We're definitely a few months ahead of schedule here. But as far as what the outlook is, it'll be interesting to see if Burrow gets out there for LSU and could be the guy. I mean, that's kind of I don't know. Obviously, Ohio State's definitely a school that's in the spotlight, a school that you're going to get on ESPN or what might have you. But the Big Ten is the Big Ten. I mean, obviously, I think it's still kind of second little brother to the SEC. I mean, the Pac-12 still kind of dealing with the same thing. SEC is where it's at. And when you can transfer to a school like LSU, and now you're playing Auburn and Ole Miss, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi State, Texas A&M to finish off the season in Texas. I mean, you're going all the way all across the SEC here. Obviously, Ohio State, their schedule is going to be just as, I mean, not quite. I don't think it's going to be quite as juicy as that one. But there are some teams in that schedule. And for Ohio State, I mean, they play obviously when you play in the Big Ten, in their Big Ten matchups, they do play Michigan at home, at Michigan State, and at home against Nebraska, and that's pretty much it. At Penn State. So, I mean, you got 2 big road games and a couple, maybe 1 or 2 big home games. Yeah, LSU has like one neutral field, big neutral field game. They have like 3 big home games and 2 big road games. So, I mean, that's the difference between the SEC and the Big Ten. All right, we'll wrap it up with this segment as we're going to come back and just bounce around some different stories around college football as we'll finish off the show today with the final segment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, welcome back. GSMC Football Podcast, the College Football Edition. I've been your host, Tom Dougherty, as we're going to finish off this show with a segment here. I do want to bring up the stuff regarding the betting that has been now, well, it looks like it's being legalized as the states are going to be able to set up their own betting systems for sports betting. It's been ruled unconstitutional. That was last week when the Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional that the sports betting could be federally banned. It should be the state's decision if they are going to allow sports betting within their territory. And there are a handful of schools now looking to kind of getting in on, getting some money back. I mean, whether it's compensation or whatever we may have you. But those things as Missouri, Rutgers, and UConn are among the schools that could be, or not could be, but are going to be exploring and looking into how they can be compensated for costs that are going to be caused by sports betting. So obviously the whole legalization of it now, I know that college football was definitely kind of off limits, especially for those betting even legally before it was federally. It was federally banned, but I mean, there are certain, obviously Nevada and Atlantic City in Las Vegas, but the college football was still kind of off limits when it comes to that. You can't really bet on college football when it comes to you could call it in the playoff, obviously, when it got there, but when it comes to like just different daily bets, daily fantasy, stayed away from that, all kind of stuff. So when it comes to college football, now the floodgates might be opening a little bit as well. I know Major League Baseball obviously also is looking into it when it comes to money that's going to be generated through this new legalized betting. The NBA and the PGA Tour also looking into this as well. As I mean, we've had different comments from different commissioners all over the place. I don't think the president of the NCAA, Mr. Emmert, I don't know what I would pay to see what he has to say about this. He's been, I don't know, the less money the better. Obviously, the NCAA has a lot of different issues that they're dealing with right now anyways when it comes to basketball stuff, scandals regarding paying players, or I know football stuff's had their own thing. There's probes all over the place. I think even the FBI has gotten involved in some of this stuff as well. So it's not the most savory thing in the world. It's not the most fun to talk about. when it comes to the dirty side of the NCAA. But when it comes to transparency, I think this is what we're trying to get into, more of a transparent world here, where everybody at least is in on it, and it's all kosher in the fact that it is legal. This gambling is legal. We are having some more money influx involved, and these schools are saying, okay, what part of the pie do we get a piece of? I think in this, and it's well, we're seeing some professional leagues as well get involved in it too going forward as well. There was as these teams are just kind of like looking. There was definitely, I mean, when it comes to peer institutions and professionals, they look for the different ways. Obviously, with this new change, they're thinking, okay, there's going to be more money changing hands. Whether there's going to be, I don't think it's really a big way to tax it or something like that, or some sort of fee that's going to be added on involved that's going to go to the school. It's like, oh, you want to bet on our games, then you got to give us a piece of the action, I guess, is the entire story of it, I guess, as well. All right. Around the league here, there's not much going on, as we kind of gone over a lot of the stuff regarding Jake Fromm. Obviously, we're sitting right now, it's May 21st. I mean, obviously, we're still a few months off here from getting into the college football into the world. Obviously, there's some more news coming out of Clemson regarding more transfers. Their other quarterback, Hunter Johnson, is planning to transfer. Yet to decide which school he wants to go to, but he's announcing that he is planning to transfer and will consider several Big Ten schools. So whether I don't know, Michigan already kind of got their quarterback. They got Shea Patterson coming over from Ole Miss. Now Joe Burrow goes and leaves a Big Ten school to go to an SEC school. Now you got an ACC guy coming in to see if he can find some footing at a Big Ten school, maybe in Nebraska. I don't know. I think that'd be an interesting spot for him to go play for Scott Frost. But Hunter Johnson, a guy who thought that he could be the heir apparent to Kelly Bryant. Obviously, they bring in Trevor Lawrence. If you get a guy like Trevor Lawrence, I think you kind of have to okay, sorry, I'll step out of your way. But Johnson has obviously been at Clemson a bit longer, has had some experience there, as he did play last year a little bit in 2017 in some garbage time. Came in and was 21 for 27 for 234 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. And last year that was in a handful of games that he did appear in. So he appeared in 7 games last year. And definitely in some I would call it garbage time for sure. But Hunter Johnson looking like he's a guy from Indiana. He definitely would have 3 years of eligibility left. That's after sitting out this coming season. Likely probably wouldn't be playing much this season anyways, as he was the backup last year for Kelly Bryant. And if Kelly Bryant does indeed get the starting job this year, I would assume that Trevor Lawrence would be his his backup and clear heir apparent coming in to the season this year. So Hunter Johnson looking to move along in his college career. Obviously, there's plenty of schools out there plenty of schools, especially in the Big Ten, as we see a bunch of them kind of rotate through being good and being bad, or depending on the schedule. Big Ten is crazy. I mean, it's interesting looking at the schedules of these teams. Obviously, the SEC every conference schedules their schools a little differently. I have to do a show where it's kind of, I know I've gone through a lot of these school schedules, but kind of just deciphering why they play, like what decides this, and like do some more stuff regarding that. But it's kind of a phenomena. I do want to get into a little bit before we get close out for the day, talking about just a bit when it comes to these freshman quarterbacks. Isn't it crazy? We're now seeing a bunch of. Obviously we had a freshman in Johnny Manziel being the first guy to win the Heisman. Then we saw Lamar Jackson set the world on fire as a freshman, and then we saw him. He actually did pretty well as a sophomore too before leaving. But Jake Fromm, Tua Tagovailoa, 2 freshmen now. No longer, but were guys as freshmen who were able to get into the college football playoff. These are guys who are just taking Power 5 Power 5 teams and just and putting them on their back and taking them to the promised land. It's just crazy how these college quarterbacks have evolved and how they've been so prepared coming in as freshmen. And you have to give it to the fact that they're probably all have passing coaches, like private coaches that have worked with them. They all went to very good college, very good high schools with high octane football ability and football coaching ability. I think it's also the fact that they're so ready. It's the preparation, the fact that their bodies are bigger, stronger, faster. They're on these workout regimens. These guys are already getting to a certain point at 18, 19, 20 years old where they can do things that kids were doing at 20, 25, 26 years old in the past because of these new ways that whether it's healthy eating or different eating programs, weightlifting programs, cross-training programs, all these different things that these guys are doing in order to get prepared and get their bodies where they want to be. Obviously, these guys as freshmen coming right out of college or right out of high school, I mean, some of them are even playing at college levels in high school because of the fact that their competition and the people they're playing with is so great. They're playing in a certain part of the country. They're playing against schools whether it's in state tournaments or what have you for state championships that are going to be having a bunch of guys go to D1 schools as well. So the fact that these guys, it's not really surprising. It's not surprising to me as we all evolve. And these kids, I mean, Jake Fromm is 19, 20 years old. So is Tua. And these guys have been playing, whether it's high octane, high level football since they were 13, 14 years old and playing in a system where they have play calling and wristbands. And it's not just go out, Sonny, and play the game. No, it's competitive, very hard-nosed football, and they've been doing it since a young age, and it's been serious. I think it's the serious factor. So the fact that it's been fun, the level of competition has always been very high for them, and they've been expected to do very well their whole careers, I think, because even at a young age, seeing what they're able to do on the college level, it's just the fact that they've probably been doing it the whole time. They've been playing at this level their whole lives, just going up the ranks, and now they're at this point in their career, and they're on TV, and they're playing for the Georgias and the Alabamas, and they're ready for it. They're ready. They're like, this is nothing. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's definitely something that I can handle because I've been prepared for this my whole career, coming up even through my young age, 10, 11, 12 years old, all the way through high school. It's been competition, heavy competition, heavy intensity, heavy, well-trained, well-bred coaches that expect high expectations. I think that's also another thing. It's having high expectations and having high boundaries for people to go to. Like your ceiling is way up there. I want you to get it. I want you to reach it. I'm like, we'll get there. No. I want you now. I want it. The coaches are kind of no nonsense these days, especially with like I said, it's all about the weights. It's all about the workout routines. These guys going under at a young age. I mean, it is kind of scary seeing it. I mean, whether we think it's going to start leading to injuries in the past. in the future in their careers. It sucks to think of it that way. But I mean, the fact that it's so great right now. Are they losing some greatness on the back end? Is that what it is? Because of the fact that they're so good to begin with at the earlier part of their careers, are they not going to be as good at the end of their careers? Yeah, they have a great prime maybe, but then maybe they're lopping off some years at the end that could be productive for them versus switching him and putting him in the beginning, where we see guys usually start slowly and end great, or have a kind of more of a parabolic bell curve kind of start where it's up and then down, versus starting up and then going down, or starting up and keep going up and then crashing down at the end. It's just the trajectory of these guys' careers is getting harder and harder to predict, and seeing them like Tua and Jake Fromm starting so well over in their seasons to start off this. In their careers to start off this in college, this new revolution of these freshman quarterback. Obviously, we've seen this. These aren't the first two guys. We saw Johnny Manziel do it. Obviously, he had a crash, and then we've seen Lamar Jackson do it now, and then he became the 32nd pick overall in the NFL draft. So, it still remains to be seen what he's going to do in the NFL with the Ravens. But as far as his success as a college player, he only extrapolated and did better off of his freshman year, and showed that he can be a guy that could just continue to be productive and be talented throughout the rest of his career, because they've been like that since they were little kids. I think these are just specimens. These are guys that were plucked as little kids and seeing that they can do certain things, and they can continue to do it throughout their lives. All right. that'll wrap it up for today's show. As we've done a bunch of stuff. We talked about Miami and their viability with Malik Rosier. We talked about a little bit of pressure and how I know Malik Rosier they said he's as well under pressure, had a bit of pressure last year. We'll see if he can maybe get himself into a better position this year. Obviously, their schedule kind of does finish out similar as it did last year. Maybe we'll see if it's a different outcome against Pitt at the end of the year. They won't be tripping up as much. Obviously, it'll be at home this season, so maybe that's the way they wanted it, as everybody kind of thought they were a year early anyways. Jake Fromm, talked about him a little bit. Obviously had a little bit of a freaky injury with him and his fishing line and his hook getting caught in his leg. But I think he's all right as he's coming into his sophomore season. And we talked about him a little bit at the end now too, with the fact that how is he so good as a freshman. And then we also did talk about some transfers. Joe Burrow going over to LSU, a big lineman from Alabama goes over to Oregon, and now it looks like he's the third string quarterback. Johnson at Clemson is looking to transfer somewhere. Looks like maybe in the Big Ten, he said. So we'll get. I talked about that for a little bit as well. So we'll sign off for the day today, as we're going to come back on Wednesday with another edition of this GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition of it, and we'll be back. And so everybody enjoy their week. Go watch some baseball, football, whatever you want. I know there's always something on. I think we're even going to get a flag football league starting here pretty soon. So go enjoy your week, and we'll talk to you guys later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.